A warm good morning to all the participants gathered over here. I hope you are all staying safe and healthy. It's my pleasure and proud privilege to welcome all the stakeholders to this 3-day online techno-legal summit on CAP, that is Cyber, Artificial Intelligence and Patents. First of all, I would like to place it on the record the wholehearted support of management of St. Joseph Engineering College, SDM Law College, and SDM Law College Alumni Association for the conduction of this first of kind summit, in fact, in this particular region. I extend cordial welcome to all the stakeholders of SJEC and SJM Law College for this event. On behalf of the event, I extend a warm welcome to Dr. Rio D'Souza, Principal, St. Joseph Engineering College, and Dr. Taranath, Principal, SDM Law College, for their encouragement and direction in execution of this program. It's my pleasure to welcome the think tank behind this program, Mr. Pushparaj K, Ms. Suma S. K of SDM Law College, and Mr. Satyendra Bhatt, Ms. Vijayalakshmi of SJC for their holistic support in the arrangement of this particular program. Very importantly, I extend a red carpet welcome to all the participants of this program. Welcome everyone. Now, I request our esteemed principal, Dr. Rio D'Souza, to give his message on this auspicious occasion.
Good morning to one and all. I'm very happy that we are having this webinar series on techno-legal aspects of three important spheres of technology: cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, and intellectual property. And such a program, I'm sure, will be of much use to all the participants as such. There is a lot of multidisciplinary work going on in the world today. If you see any solution of any problem, it is very important to involve more than one discipline, because problems and the solutions do not respect the boundaries that humans have created, that this is technology and that is legal things and so on. Everything is at the cross section of one field or the other. So when one wants to go deep and understand impact of technology, one needs to know the legal implications. And if one wants to be a legal practitioner who protects rights of technologists and the impacts of those, then one needs to understand technological aspects. So multidisciplinary approach in this is very important, and a series of webinars in this particular aspect, especially on emerging technologies such as cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, and patenting, intellectual property, and so on, is a good step that has been taken by our IQAC committees of both the colleges. I really appreciate the efforts of Dr. Srirang Bhatt on our side, St. Joseph Engineering College, and Mr. Pushparaj K on the SDM Law College side, for having come together and design this program for all of you. It's going to be 3 days of good deliberations. There are many experts who will talk about different aspects. So I wish the participants the very best. Be critical. Do not just accept everything that is said, and have a good time. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you, sir, for your great insight on the multidisciplinary approach of technology as well as these legal aspects. Now I request Dr. Taranath, Principal, SDM Law College, to give his message to this August gathering.
A very good morning to all the participants of 3 days summit on techno-legal issues relating to artificial intelligence, cyber crimes, as well as patents. We know that the hard reality of our present education system is a segregation between the subject result in compartmentalization of various subjects and which has once again resulted in creation of wall of separation between the subjects. Obviously, human being is a focal point of any study. Most of the studies are oriented towards look into human beings' likes and dislikes, his affiliation towards the ideologies, his achievements to the science as well as the technology, and also contribution thereof. Yet we are unable to borrow from each other. To give an example, a law student or a lawyer deals with the various issues relating to patent. He may be well versed in drafting the patent agreement, incorporating various clauses, provisions as such. At the same time, the technical issues relating to drafting a patent agreement, he may not be knowing much. Invariably, he is required to resort to the technician to understand the same thing. At the same time, student of law must be knowing lot of things as far as cyber crimes are concerned, and he has understood the various aspects relating to cyber crimes, but he may not be knowing much of the things relating to investigation of the cyber crimes where the technical issues are involved. The same thing is going to happen as far as engineering graduate or engineers are concerned. An engineer may be good in understanding the technical issues relating to patent. When any item has got innovativeness as well as a creativity, it has to be patented, and he knows much about that product, but he may not be knowing the legal issues governing how to go for a registration of the patent. And an engineering student once again may be well aware about artificial intelligence, the use of the same in order to bring down human efforts. But how the artificial intelligence is going to be misused and what are the drawbacks of artificial intelligence, he may not be well versed. So here we need a collaborative efforts, and we started this process in association with the St. Joseph's College of Engineering, wherein in this summit we are going to discuss about various legal as well as the technical issues which are governing artificial intelligence, cyber crimes as well as patents. And our effort will not going to stop over here. We would like to associate ourselves not only with our St. Joseph's College of Engineering in the days to come, we would like to associate with the various medical college, pharmacy college, the chapters of institution of company secretary for the purpose understanding legal as well as the related issues which these institutions are handling. I wish all the participants all the best, and I hope that this will going to give the best of the things for them. My special thanks to the authorities of St. Joseph's College of Engineering for the purpose of being associated with us, and I congratulate Mr. Pushparaj as well as the coordinator of St. Joseph's College of Engineering for the purpose of wonderfully organizing this summit. I wish all the best for this summit. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your visionary approach towards the techno-legal aspects. Before we begin the event, I would like to highlight some of the key points about the program. The program will start on time and session will be for 1 hour followed by a discussion for 15 minutes. After that, there is a break for 15 minutes and the second session will start exactly at 11:30 a.m. Same link will be used for both the sessions of the day. However, a new link will be given to all the participants at the end of the day, probably at the evening, for the next day registration. E-certificate will be provided to those who attend all the sessions and provide feedback. The feedback link will be provided at the end of each day. Participants are requested to fill the same within 48 hours. Also, participants are muted by default and not able to unmute on their own. Thus, we request all the participants to post their questions or queries through the chat box. The moderator will communicate those questions to the resource person during the discussion session. Sessions are recorded and will be available in the YouTube channel of both SJC and STM Law College within a week for the benefit of all the stakeholders. Now, without any further delay, we will start with the first session. The topic of the session is artificial intelligence for techno-legal aspects by our esteemed resource person, Dr. Rio D'Souza. It's my pleasure to introduce our principal to the August gathering. Dr. Rio D'Souza earned his BE in Electrical and Electronics Engineering from Karnataka University, M.Tech in Computer Science and Engineering from Jayachamarajendra College of Engineering, and PhD from National Institute of Technology, Karnataka. He also holds Advanced Diploma in Applied Bioinformatics from Bioinformatics Institute of India. Over a period of spanning 10 years, he has worked in several academic positions at Kalpataru Institute of Technology at Chittoor, St. Aloysius Institute of Computer Science, Mangalore, and NITK. He was with the JAL International Corporation, Saudi Arabia, as a project manager for 5 years. Since 2006, he is with the Department of Computer Science and Engineering at St. Joseph Engineering College, Mangalore, and has served in various capacities, both as academician as well as the administrative. From June 2018, he has taken over as the principal of St. Joseph Engineering College. His current research interests includes evolutionary computing, cloud computing, and engineering education. Dr. D'Souza is a life member of Indian Society for Technical Education and Advanced Computing and Communication Society. He is a senior member of IEEE and a fellow of Institution of Engineers. He has been included in the panel of international experts on engineering education by Indo-Universal Collaboration on Engineering Education, that is IUCEE, and has conducted pre-certification workshops for the IUCEE International Engineering Education Certification Program at several colleges in India. Recently, he has been awarded by IUCEE as an Outstanding Institution Leader for the year 2019. Respected sir, it's my privilege to introduce as well as to host you for this particular event. The forum is open to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Srirang Bhatt, for that wonderful introduction. Let me just load my presentation and then we will continue. So I hope my presentation is visible.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so welcome to this program. I'm happy that we are in fact starting 1 or 2 minutes early. It's not yet 10. So I will just spend the first 2 minutes talking about one particular scenario to give some introduction to this topic. Because there might be people, logging in on time at 10 o'clock and might find that the program has started already and be disappointed. So just to talk about one particular scenario and then we will get into the topic as such. Imagine that you are trying to cross the road and you are hit by a car, and then you discover that the car is driven by a driving it. So if at all by autonomous system, Hello, can I continue?
Yes, sir.
Okay, because it was keeping on saying this meeting is being recorded. That's why I thought there's some
Yes,
problem.
sir. For a while, there was a technical glitch, sir.
Okay, okay, fine. I will continue. Okay, I'll continue. Okay, okay. Okay. So, as I said, if you are in a situation where you are hit by an autonomously driven car, then what do you do? Whom do you approach? Whom do you approach for compensation as such? Because is the car might be owned by somebody, and the owner of the car might say, I'm not responsible for it. It was driven by autonomous system. You have to check with the makers of the system there. The makers of the system might say that the car was used in a context which it was not supposed to, and so on, or the system is configured in that way that this is not our responsibility. So there can be a lot of legal aspects that can emerge out of such a situation where artificial intelligence is being used to drive a car or operate a system in which normally we would have a very clear responsibility fixing if something goes wrong, and then you would have somebody responsible to compensate or to make amends. Now this is the type of situation that we think about when we talk about technological aspects. Just an example, and I will now get into the topic as such. Artificial intelligence is on one end of the spectrum in technology, and the legal aspects or the legal point to the viewpoint is on the other end, as such. So coming together of two fields like this is something which is going to be much more common in the coming days, because as I was mentioning in my introductory speech also, that most of the problems that you see, almost all the problems, are not restricted to a particular discipline, and that there is always that the borders are merged and there will be a common area which one has to work upon. So one needs to know more than one subject in order to solve problems, and that is what we are trying to talk about here. So with this brief introduction, I will get into the topic, and then um, talk about what is artificial intelligence, the technology behind it, the philosophical and ethical questions that are dominating there, and some of the legal aspects as such. I am no expert in legal aspects, and I am nor am I an expert in artificial intelligence for that matter, though I can claim to have some amount of knowledge on artificial intelligence, and I've studied a little bit of the legal implications of this. This is specifically because of my interest in philosophy. So, reading about philosophy and the ethical questions which surround artificial intelligence, I happen to come across the legal implications, and that is how I got into this particular area. So, if you look at the technological progress, always it brings ethical challenges to us, and philosophers might debate endlessly whether uh, a particular ethical standpoint is right or not for a particular technology as such. Let us take human cloning, for example. So far, cloning has not happened in humans, or we don't know. It might have happened, but they have cloned sheep and certain other animals and so on. Tomorrow, let us say they clone humans. Is it right ethically to clone humans? Is a question. But the technology is almost here now. In fact, it might have already been done also. We don't know. Whereas the ethical question is not yet resolved. Philosophers are still debating. But one of the things here is that philosophers have been debating things which much in advance of things happening, but they have not been able to provide solutions. One of the things we have to understand is solutions to ethical dilemmas have to be worked out at some point or other, either with a compromise or not, whatever it is. But when we come to the advent of a technology, when we have to actually cross the bridge, when we have to actually cross the river, when we are at that point, then we have to solve problems. Trying to solve them much in advance is not easy at all, or those solutions are of no use. They are just philosophical debates. But when you are at the advent of a technology, you can, when you are at the advent of a technology, you can actually try to solve a problem, and you can try to solve the ethical dilemmas that surround it. So, because of this gap that the technologies, that the philosophers keep discussing problems in advance, and many times technology advances, and only then you can try to solve the ethical problems around it. We have that perpetual feeling that technology creates more problems than it solves. It is true that only when we observe that there is a problem because of some technological solution, then we try to solve it. So this is the loop that goes on, and that has got implications for AI and its technological aspects. That's why I brought this in here at this point. A quote by Einstein, makes sense in this particular context, that we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. Okay, so coming to a definition of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is the ability of a computer or a computer-controlled robot to perform tasks commonly associated with intelligent beings. I have taken a very commonplace definition because this particular talk of mine is addressed to people who do not have much background in computers or artificial intelligence and so on. It is supposed to be for the people from legal side also, as well as technological side, a bridging type of a talk. So that's why I took a very commonplace definition from Encyclopedia Britannica. Now here he talks about intelligent beings, assuming that we are the intelligent beings, that there are tasks that we perform. And then if you have given the same ability to some other system, let us say a computer-controlled robot or a computer, then that is where we will say that whatever an intelligent being was doing is being done now by an artificial system which we have created. So then that would be artificial intelligence as such. So to slightly broaden the definition, I have modified it, saying that artificial intelligence is the ability of any entity created by intelligent beings. Now, that is because in today's artificial intelligence systems, you find intelligence embedded in almost anything. Okay, you have refrigerators with artificial intelligence, dishwashers, and then cars and mobiles, and so it's everywhere. It's getting embedded into everything. So in this case, it wouldn't be just a full-fledged computer or a robot. It could be any device that you have can be embedded, and that's why I have put it this way, saying that entity created by intelligent beings. If it is if it is given the ability to perform tasks which are associated with intelligent beings also, then we would say that it has got artificial intelligence, because it is trying to do something which an intelligent being otherwise would have done. So this is the way we use this definition, which is very broad. So some historical context is called for at this point, that when the first time the artificial intelligence term was used in a Dartmouth conference in 1956, and it became popular in the 1960s, and mostly popular because of it caught the imagination of the popular media. And what happens when things catch the imagination, things get completely exaggerated and completely blown up. And that is what happened with the books and the movies of that time, that there was a lot of literature out there, and fictional scenarios created where they said robots will overtake the planet, and artificial intelligence will dominate, and then this and that, all sorts of implications, and this was discussed, and a lot of demonizing was done of the concept of artificial intelligence. In fact, it came to a point that governments started fearing to fund artificial intelligence research to some extent, or they were doing it more secretly, which means to a less, the research was limited only to some particular defense establishments. And with that, what happened is there was a sort of AI winter in the late 1970s, where AI research, artificial intelligence research, was reduced. There was not much work going on at that point. After that, in the early 1980s, there was a bloom again for some time, and again then there was a winter for in the late 1980s that again research funding went down. So there has been some cycle of awakened interest in this field, and then again dying down and so on. So one of the reasons for this we will see a little later when we talk about symbolic and numeric AI, about this cycle of interest coming and going, that sort of thing. But let us just talk about the historical context first. A major revival in the interest happened only in 1997 onwards, that when the news came out that IBM's Deep Blue computer had beaten the reigning chess champion of that time, Russian Grandmaster Garry Kasparov. A lot of interest came up, and people started looking at things like that. Now computers are becoming more intelligent than human beings and so on. This is what they started talking about. So this sort of a trend also has gone on, that in the popular media these sort of things are being highlighted, and then people build stories around it and movies and so on. So in 2014 again there was this talking computer chatbot called Eugene Gustman, and if you look up on the net you will get even you can chat with that bot saying that but what was the thing there, this particular chatbot was able to fool people into thinking that they are talking to a real human being as such. And there is a famous test called Turing test. We'll be talking about Turing test later, but Turing test is supposed to be to check whether a particular system is human or not. You should be able to, if you run the Turing test, you should be able to make out whether it's a human being or not. And if you are able to fool the Turing test, that means you have an intelligence which is as good as a human as such. So then in that particular case, that particular chatbot was able to fool the jury, and thinking that they made the jury think that the chatbot was actually human. Again, in 2017, we have one of the greatest achievements, I would say, is that the Google's DeepMind computer program AlphaGo beat the world's #1 player of Asian Chinese board game Go. So this is the real dawn of real, intelligence, artificial intelligence, I would say, because this game really requires what we saw with the chess beating of chess, Deep Blue before in 1997, which I mentioned, was more of a mechanical type of a thing which was based on rules. But this was where it was really using intelligent thinking as such, which humans are capable of. So this is where we have the historical context, and with that I would just like to get into some of the technology behind artificial intelligence. So if we want to know about the implication of artificial intelligence and so on, we need to know what are the types there, how does it work basically. A few things we need to know. Even from a legal standpoint, this is important to understand. So just to get into a sort of brief introduction there to the technology. Basically, the artificial intelligence that has, the way it has developed, it has come out in two ways. That is, one is called as the symbolic artificial intelligence, the other one is the numeric. In the symbolic artificial intelligence, we are attempting to explicitly represent human knowledge in a declarative form. That is, we start with, for example, saying that the flower has got petals, and the flower has got a calyx, it has got stamen, it has got parts of the flower. You mention those. Then you say the combination of all this is the flower. And then you say flowers are found on plants. Then you define what's a plant. So if you go on putting facts together, and then say that if there is a plant, if there are leaves, and if there are flowers, then it is a plant. So you make rules like that. So when you make rules like this based on facts, making the rules, but meaning embed meaning into this whole process. And that is where the semantics part of it, the meaning part of the whole thing. Syntax is about the rule of, setting all the facts and rules together, facts and, processes together. And then, when you set up a system which goes about doing this, then you embed meaning into that system. This is symbolic AI. So examples for these are expert systems, medical expert system, legal expert system, and all softwares which are available where a number of facts and rules are stored in the system. And then let us say a medical expert system, if you go and talk about the tests that you have performed, the results of the tests, and if you tell the symptoms to the system, it almost accurately diagnoses your sickness and tells you what is wrong with you. A lot of doctors use this. Medical information expert systems are very popular, and there are expert systems like this in technology, in legal field, and so on, where a lot of facts are stored, which are very very much human like results that you get, the answers to your questions. But that is all symbolic AI, where every label is defined and then it is linked as such. The other artificial intelligence that has come about is numeric AI. Now, historically, when the artificial intelligence field first started in the 60s, it was symbolic AI that they were trying to do. And it went on, but then quickly people found that when you have two expert systems and you want to combine them into a multidisciplinary expert system, let us say a techno-legal system or a medical and technology together also, then there was a lot of problem that they could not build such systems, that the symbolic AI started failing. And that is why there was a winter of that in the late 1980s until 1990s, when numeric AI started becoming popular, or what is called as today is called as machine learning. When that became popular, only then that there was renewed interest, and then people funding started coming in and research started coming in. So numeric AI is much more powerful than symbolic AI, is my opinion, and it is the one which is dominating today, and maybe the one which will be able to ultimately come out with a real artificial intelligence system. Now, what happens in a numeric AI is that numbers are used to represent and manipulate intermediate degrees of knowledge. So let us, just give an example for this, and I would like to take the example of the human brain itself for a numeric AI, because in the human brain, the way information is stored is not symbolically; it is stored as numbers as such. Let me tell you how that happens. All of you know that the brain contains a lot of neurons. Okay, somewhere to the tune of 100 million neurons are there in the human brain, 10 to the power of 11 or so neurons as such. And each neuron has got its own dendrites and axon and so on. And the dendrites are in contact with other dendrites of other neurons. I mean, the axons end up again in dendrites, and those dendrites get in touch with the neurons of the other neurons where they are in contact with. So what happens is, from the dendrites, signals get into the cell body of the neurons, which is called as the soma, and then it triggers a response into the axon, again, which goes and impacts the other dendrites which are connected to it. So that is how the thinking process happens. That is how we perceive things. We get electrochemical signals from the sensory organs such as eyes, ears, and so on, and then those signals are electrochemically passed into the neural system inside in the mind, in the brain, and then they get processed from neuron to neuron. It happens very fast. Each neuron doesn't spend more than a few milliseconds processing this, and so within a few 100 milliseconds you can get a response from the system. So in this, where is the actual information stored? One has to understand that, because neurons only process the signals. Neurons do not store anything. The actual storage happens in the connections between the neurons. So if there are 100 million neurons, there are 100, almost 100 times, there are 1,000 times that more, 10 to the power of 14 connections that they have. One neuron has something between 10 to 1000 connections with the other neurons. Every connection is a place where information is stored, because in the connection between two neurons, there is something called as neurotransmitter, which is a chemical substance which is secreted. And the neurotransmitter, when a signal passes through it, stores a memory there. In the sense, if a signal passes through a particular connection, the next time that particular connection is activated, a stronger signal is passed. That means the connection gets changed forever when it is fired. Before the firing, if the neurotransmitter concentration was X, after the firing, it will become X plus something, delta X, a little more than it was before. That means every moment of your living life, the neurotransmitter concentrations in your brain, which are at the synapses of the dendrites of neurons, the neurotransmitter concentrations keep on changing. The values keep on changing, go on changing. And that is how you go on learning things. For example, let us say now I will introduce a game which you have never heard of so far. Let us say bongo ball. So now all of you, your brains never knew what bongo ball was. Now at this point, you know what is bongo ball. 1 degree, in the sense it is some game mentioned by Dr. Rio de Souza. That's all you know. But you don't know what is bongo ball as such. So this is 1 degree. See, I already changed the synapses of all your brains, whether you like it or not. And now your brains are able to figure out what is bongo ball. It is something mentioned as a game. That much you know. That is 1 degree of, you know. So we were talking in the previous slide of degrees of knowledge. If you see the intermediate degrees of knowledge, numbers. But it's just synapses in your brain, you know. Now I will modify synapses further so that you learn 1 more degree. I will tell you bongo ball is a game played in Africa with a ball. Now you get 2 more degrees of knowledge there, in the sense 1 more degree at least, in the sense you know that it's played in Africa, and you know it's played with a ball. So you might have figured out that ball part, but I've told you it's in Africa. So that is the new knowledge, another degree of knowledge, you see. But where does that get stored? Again, it's a modification of certain synapses in your brain. And if I ask you after, you know, about after this talk, to tell me what is bongo ball, you will be able to probably tell me that it's a game played with a ball in Africa. So that is because your synapses are changed. Otherwise, you would not have remembered that. You know, it's there in your memory, working memory right now, but it will get stored if it's found to be an important piece into your long-term memory also. And in fact, if you keep on thinking about it, it will get stored in a much stronger way that you can recall it. If you make use of that knowledge in doing something, that is from the sensory neurons, it gets processed, and then you give signals to your motor neurons and do something with it, a skill type of thing, then it gets even more enhanced, stronger, and that knowledge stays there. But in the end, it is only concentrations of neurotransmitters and their values which have changed, nothing else. So it's the numbers that store information. But large number of numbers, 10 to the 4 or 14, is a number which is equal to almost the number of atoms that are there in the in the universe, known universe. It's that big as such. The number of connections that are there. So when you have that sort of a number at your let us say disposal, then you can think of the power of the human brain to process and store things and so on as such. So this is where numerical intelligence, this is all about numbers and the way they are connected. It's all about connections and numbers being connected that way. The problem with this is that we humans have not been able to figure out how these connections and numbers work out to make up the intelligence, or on the whole completely. We don't know yet. But there are many artificial neural network systems and so on, which have been created from our limited knowledge of how the brain works, human brain or any brain for that matter works. So that is how we have come up with numerical artificial intelligence systems, which are mostly based on artificial neural networks from a limited information or understanding of the human brain. This is the story behind the numeric AI. and that is the one which is becoming more powerful, and because it is based on a natural analogy, natural system, we are copying from there, imitating it. And normally, when you imitate nature and you try to work out solutions, they always are more robust than the ones which we have tried to only develop from our own intelligence as such. Symbolic AI was one such system of AI, which was completely based on human intelligence as such. But this is something by looking at a natural system that we are trying to build, and that has been found to be much more stronger and much more, having more potential for the future. But still, we don't understand the human brain completely, and so that point is put up here. That's why I brought in these four types of AI at this point of time. Type 1 AI is reactive machines. So Deep Blue was a reactive machine. So that means it was just reacting. You see, we say that, for example, when you touch something hot, that you draw your hand back. That's the reaction which happens there. So that particular signal doesn't go up to the brain. It only goes up to your spinal cord, and then you have a reactive, response, immediate response. That's a type of response which is built in by evolution to protect you from some harm being caused to your body as such. That it's automatic that the hot thing will damage your skin and your body, so it is reacting back. So there are in nature all degrees of intelligence you find. Even for that matter, if you go down to an atom, it has some intelligence that the electrons are in one place. The design of nature is that way. That intelligence of one level builds on top of the previous level as such. At the most bottom level, there is intelligence a very basic degree of intelligence in atoms and the way they are built into molecules, and molecules are then built into other systems. So if you look at the amoeba has got a basic degree of intelligence that when it finds something which is supposed to be its food, it envelopes it and digests it within, and takes it within itself and then digests it. So it is able to sense that and take that particular or react to that particular situation. If you look at such beings, they are basically all this reaction. There is action and there is a reaction as such. Deep Blue, IBM's Deep Blue was a reactive system in the sense there were rules, and based on those rules it was reacting, and that is how it was able to defeat Gary Kasparov. It did not have much of a memory. It was not able to remember what moves it had made. It was looking at what was the present chess or present situation state on the board, and what was the next step to take. What is the best next step to take? That's all. That was the program there, which was built into that. So that means not much of memory. It just reacts. So when you sometimes react to something without thinking much, that is when we say we are reactive as such, and that's not supposed to be such a good thing because it's a very basic type of response. Then you have these limited memory systems. So the AlphaGo is coming into that category, and so that way it was a major improvement on the reactive machines, where there is some memory of what has happened so far, and based on that, the next action is taken. So when you remember that last time I had done this and I did not have a good outcome of that, I should not do this, I should do it in a different way, then we say we have learned something. When we say we have learned something, the synapses in our mind have changed, and that is where we have memory which we can modify, and that memory helps us to take decisions for the current situation. When we get new sensory information about the current situation, what is there outside, then we have memory of what we should be doing, what we had done last time, and we compare and then we take a decision. This is what our mind allows us to do. These are limited memory systems. So AlphaGo of Google was able to do that, and that is how it was able to, defeat this uh, uh, intelligent game called Go. The player there was playing Go. The next level would be theory of mind. In theory of mind, one would look into the way our human mind works, and then the fact that human mind is able to create representations of the outside world through its numeric systems, numeric memory, and then act on those and take decisions and then react or respond. This is what is called as theory of mind, that we are able to represent what is there outside in the world with our internal systems, and we can think about it. Not only can we think about it, we also talk within our mind about it. So our mind is called as a talking mind. Not only thinking, talking. When we think, we talk to ourselves. What happens is our mind is able to see, create scenarios and imagine, which is doesn't happen in lower levels of intelligence. So if you see, I was talking about levels of intelligence, amoeba and all I talked about. Even touch me not plants, for example, they have some amount of intelligence. Plants know that they have to grow towards the light. Plants know how to process a light and get energy out of it, photosynthesis. Plants, uh, then next level comes, the mobile creatures, that are the, animals and so on. They have a higher level of intelligence because they have to move around. And when moving, you need to process things dynamically, which plants don't need to do. So there is a level of intelligence there, and they know how to react. And there's a muscular system which plants don't need because they don't have to move. And the muscular system, motor system, has to be driven by the mind. So sensory system brings in the signals to the mind, and then the motor system puts out the signals and makes things happen because of movement of muscles. That is how the neural system works and does things. So that is actually the theory of mind sort of thing. So we have not come completely to this, though a lot of systems have come very near to this. We have not completely come to this level because we don't really understand completely how the mind works still. There are, intentionality and so many theories are there, but nobody has completely figured out. And if they had figured out by now, they would have known how to cross that, you know boundary and go beyond to a super intelligence. That is another thing which we have to think about. So that would be one level of it. Beyond that, there is also one more level that people feel, that we call as self-awareness. That is when that we not only are able to represent the outside world in our thinking, but at the same time we also are able to represent ourselves in that thinking process. Then we call that a self-awareness, where we talk about consciousness. So humans are supposed to have consciousness. So that is a little higher than what the type of intelligence that other animals have. And the other animals might have consciousness, but to a lesser degree, because in nature nothing is hard and fast, black and white. There's always degrees of it. So as intelligence, as I said, it is there from even from the inanimate to the animate side, from plants to the animals, and then to the the what is supposed to be the pinnacle of pinnacle of animal evolution, that is the humans. There is a degree of intelligence. Similarly, a degree of consciousness also is there from the lower animals to the topmost, supposed to be the best evolved animal, that is the human being. So the consciousness is the one which sets us apart from other animals. We not only are able to react and respond to the situation around us, we are able to plan, we are able to ethically think about things, and so on. And so that is the awareness about our role in the universe, and that way, that is a completely different level, self-awareness, consciousness. So we are not yet able to create theory of mind type of artificial intelligence. Forget about consciousness, we are not up to that level as such. But one day it might happen. In that case, what to do is something which one can think about. So this is a quote attributed to Descartes, and I think therefore I am. So we are a result of our thinking. That's what is the point. Now, one of the things is, because of these consequences and all, a lot of fear is there in the minds of people about artificial intelligence and its implications and so on. I'm not putting points here which are there in the common mind as such. I'm talking about experts in AI. What are the fears that they have? Even understanding the technology fully, what do you think? What are those issues which they feel are still unresolved and they are not able to figure out how to look into that? One is the fear of the unforeseen, because there have been cases where a lot of intelligence systems were around, but still something went wrong. For example, if you talk about the Challenger space shuttle crash or the Chernobyl nuclear accident, a lot of safeguards were in place, but still things went wrong. You see, this is where there can be something unforeseen because of the artificial system that we built, and it's that way. So this is one fear, and fear of the unforeseen. People say there is fear of misuse, that a particular human might take this artificial intelligence and you misuse it for his or her own gain as such. And so the fear of misuse, that the using person who might be a human and you misuse it as such. So this is one of the issues. The first issue, the first fear was more of the malfunctioning or wrong or unexpected functioning of a system. The second one is deliberate misuse as such. The third one is fear of wrong social priorities. Again, this is where we cannot expect artificial intelligence systems to have the type of ethical mooring that we humans have. In spite of we are supposed to be ethical beings, we still have got so many times so many biases, and we discriminate. And so this is where the problem comes, that what if machines also do the same thing? What if robots do the same thing, or artificial intelligence systems start doing the same thing because of the rules that they are supposed to be built upon? This is where there is that fear. And the fourth fear is of the nightmare scenario. This is a little bit of science fiction in the sense that if one day they become super intelligent, the systems come up and they take up the whole planet, or they take up the human race, or destroy the human race, and they take up that sort of a fear. That is called as a nightmare scenario. So these are a few fears that even experts have, for that matter. Not forget about people who do not have a background in this as such. So going on, we are talking about a few attempts in history where people have tried to look into these fears from a philosophical point of view much before they were becoming reality, and try to propose some solutions and so on. So Isaac Asimov was a science fiction writer of the in the 1940s and 50s. He has published so many books on science fiction. In fact, I used to read a lot of those books, mostly about space and journey into space and and so on. But they are all fiction. They are not realistic. But again, science fiction requires a lot of understanding of technology to and be able to predict how things will happen in the future. So it's all about futuristic, seen from a 1940-50 standpoint as such. But he's got very good imagination. So in his books, he had a lot of robots going about, because his books were all science fiction, and he had some rules for the robots which he had proposed. And he said if robots are able to follow these rules, then they will be ethical. They will be ethically acting ethically. So the first law says a robot may not injure a human being, or through inaction allow a human being to come to harm. This is the first one which he has proposed. The second one says the robots must obey the orders given to it by human beings, except where such orders would conflict with the first law. So it means that if you have a robot under your command, you can't ask it to kill somebody else, because that would conflict with the first one, where it would allow it to human being to come under injury as such. So he says if you build such robots, they will automatically be ethical, is what he is talking about. And third one is a robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first and the second laws. So again, when he proposed these laws, a lot of these movies also have tried to come into use these laws and try to justify the use of robots and so on. Terminator is one such, for example, where the robot is ready to destroy itself, but it's not ready to allow harm to come to the human being who is supposed to, it is supposed to protect. So Asimov's rules were one attempt at that time. But people say today you need a much more evolved set of rules than this one. Then I would like to now talk about the Turing test. Again, these are all attempts at some point of time by philosophers who have tried to, trying to distinguish between what is natural, what is artificial, intelligence, and so on. Turing test was one such test proposed by Alan Turing. Alan Turing is known as the father of computing, and you know, he proposed a test like this. He said, you make an interrogator, C, sit on one side of a screen. On the other side, you have one side, one computing system, and the other side you have the another human as such. And the interrogator puts the same set of questions to both the systems A and B. He doesn't know which is which. And from the replies that both of them give, if he is not able to distinguish whether A is a human or not, or he is not able to distinguish between A and B and say which is which, then that means A is a really intelligent. It is the intelligence system equal to human intelligence. This is what he said. And so the questions, he are also given the type of questions to be asked and so on. And people have, tried Turing tests on machines and so on. And you saw in one of the previous slides in 2014 that one of the computers actually cracked the Turing test, and that is the chatbot I was mentioning. Eugene Gustman was able to actually fool 33% of the jury in that particular case. In fact, after that, there have been systems which have fooled 100% of the juries. That means today's chatbots technology has become so good that you can't actually make out whether you're talking to a human or a machine. It's so good. So they are being used now so many places. In the commercial field, you have machines talking to you so many of the time. You never make out about it. You cannot make out it's a machine. It's a machine talking to you at all. So they are used in situations where admissions have to be taken place, or response to customer queries, and so many scenarios they are used, and they have become really good. In fact, they are more efficient in answering such queries for customers and people who want to take help, online help. They have become more efficient than human beings, in fact. So this is the place where suddenly jobs start vanishing, and the artificial intelligence systems start doing things which otherwise require a lot of intelligence as such. So if you look at jobs, there are jobs which are quite having a specific format in which you have to do it, where automation becomes easy. Then there are jobs which have got a lot of uncertainty. For example, you take a job where a person has to go into a forest and cut down some trees. So he has to go identify where the tree is, which is to be cut, and so on, and make sure where it has to be cut. So you can't build automatic systems to do it so easily. It has to have some amount of intelligence to do it. But it's a what we say, manual task, where which you would like to automate. But that is where artificial intelligence would really be useful, because that sort of a job you would like to give to the machines to do. But machines, unless there is a human manipulating the machine, you can't do it. But if you have an artificial intelligence system that would replace the human being, then that would be able to take care of that job automatically. This is a real scenario. But then what happens to the human who loses a job in that particular process is a question which one has to look at. So these are Turing tests, these have been there for some time. Again, there has been questions about Turing tests saying that this is not the actual, final word on artificial intelligence. Anyhow, the point is, I put this quote here by Marie Curie saying, "Nothing in life is to be feared; it is only to be understood." So let us try to understand some of the philosophical and ethical undermoorings of this particular technology. Some philosophical questions. Okay, just read the questions while I drink some water. So we use the word artificial intelligence, and there are philosophers who say, "What do you mean artificial? From where did you get that thinking?" because they say that even if humans created something, that also is part of nature. Humans are part of nature, human brain is part of nature, and what human beings do also is part of nature, that is also natural. So what way are you saying is artificial? The distinction made here is more from a moral point of view. It's more from that side, in the sense people say that since we have a capacity to understand and take decisions, and the, we consciously are able to do things and plan for the future, that is the level of intelligence we have, which is much different from what other animals have. For example, humans are able to override many of our automatic reactive systems, which are built to by nature into us. Uh, you know, for example, the instinct of uh, life preservation, that we want to preserve ourselves, preserve our life, that we are very careful not to get into a dangerous situation. Self-preservation, that's the instinct that is built into us by nature. But we are able to override that. Suicide is an example of such thing where a person goes and kills himself, overriding the instinct of self-preservation. So that is supposed to be because we have a conscious way of thinking and doing things, which are able to override our instincts as such. But there are, in animals, that sort of a phenomena is not there. There is one or two examples of a few cases where mass suicide of some animals and all that, but that's a aberration, I would say, rather than something where they have actually doing it deliberately as such. There are one or two cases where mass suicide of animals do mass suicide, but that's a very rare situation, and there is a theory behind it. But otherwise, you know, humans beings are supposed to have that sort of a capacity as such. Okay, so that is one thing. So that is where we say that we are having a capacity to build something which is intelligent by our ability to think about it. That is why whatever we do, which comes out of our intelligence, is artificial, not natural. Okay, so that is the argument behind that. So then there is also there is a question about is when you say intelligent, is it really intelligent as such? So that is where the consciousness issue comes in, because in most of the artificial intelligence systems which they talk about today, there is no consciousness as such. So if it's really conscious, then it comes to the level of a human intelligence, and then you will not be able to. You will have to think about its rights, just like your human rights, and you will not be able to switch it off. If you switch it off, you're feeling it. It's a consciousness. It's something like, in our moral standpoint, we say the soul as such, that way. Because when we talk about consciousness, we talk, people immediately relate, and soul is supposed to, exist forever, even though the human body might die as such. So that's what the consciousness is related to that. That is the thing which is supposed to we are supposed to have, which makes us beyond other animals or above other animals as such. So that part, is it really there in the software systems that we build? So far, it's not there, but will we be able to build that? There's many philosophers say that no matter what you do, you will not be able to bring in consciousness. But then there are people who say one day conscious intelligence systems will happen. If that is the case, then how are you going to give them rights? And what if they start for multiplying and having their own uh, type of a living system as such? So then that is another question as such. Then there is the question of intelligence being surpassed. Since we are having artificial intelligence and we have built it, if we find out how to do that and we are able to go beyond that and create a super intelligence, what happens then? Will that be used as a tool or a armament against others? Uh, will it be used by the people who created it to dominate the planet, or maybe the super intelligence will also dominate the other intelligences that are there on the planet, like humans, and propagate itself? What will happen as such? These are all philosophical questions that are there. I do not have full answers to this. Very interesting reading. You should read about it. It's very nice. Okay, so there are a few ethical questions also we need to look at, more relating to our existence on the planet. So these are more important for us. The philosophical questions might not be so important, but these are. Okay. Now, unemployment is one thing. What happens after the end of all the jobs? That is, if artificial intelligence starts doing what humans have been doing, and which was supposed to be the domain where we were excelling in the sense, thinking as such, thinking jobs. And if they are going to get into that, and they're also able to do strategy and all that to that level where managers and all the other people can be replaced, even the governing people are able to be replaced by machines. If that is the case, then what do actually humans do after that? What is the employment that they're supposed to do? Okay, let us say all these machines belong to human beings, so there is no problem. We don't need to work as such. Okay, we just live. But then, what about the inequality? How do we distribute the health created by machines? If they are going to do everything and they are going to generate and do the development, what happens to the livelihood of humans as such? This is where, in very developed societies, the concept of common salary to everyone, common minimum salary, all these concepts are coming up because of this sort of a thinking where they feel the development is because of everyone, and so a minimum salary should be paid to everyone from the common this thing that is there, pool. So this sort of a thing, this is the idea behind that. So then, humanity, how do machines affect our behavior and interaction? So if there is a time when artificial intelligence systems are going to become prevalent everywhere, then what happens to our interaction with them, and what happens, how do we take it forward? Now, the fourth one, if there is artificial intelligence, there must be artificial stupidity also, in the sense when intelligent people can do mistakes, then you would expect intelligent machines also do mistakes. And then if those mistakes are done, who is responsible? How can we guard against such mistakes? What do we do about them? These are the questions which are there. Some more are there, in the sense there are 9 questions raised by some of the experts. One is about the racist robots. I already spoke about the discrimination possible, because sometimes the biases can creep into the artificial intelligence systems also. For example, when building a simple artificial neural network to solve a simple problem, for example, if you look at pattern recognition and so on, which artificial intelligence systems do very well nowadays. Autonomous cars have come. They are able. There is a camera. It is able to see the scene and then interpret and take decisions as to where to turn, what to do, and all that. That's how autonomous cars drive themselves. They identify everything that is coming in its scene in front of it, and they are able to navigate through those as such. Just like a human being would drive through as such, take the decisions of the right turn, speed, and all that. They're able to do it. Now, we have found that when you build a system, they have to be having a certain information put into them. That information is put by people who program the system. You can make a learning system, but even then, for learning, you have to provide it all the case studies and show the situations. Artificial intelligence system has to be trained. Without training, it is not able to drive actually. So the training can be plugged into it directly also by changing the neural values directly. So when you do that and you are trying to train it and so on, a bias can creep in. So for a particular thing, and that bias is the same type of bias that humans have. Then what do you do with such systems when they are having biases and they discriminate between people or discriminate between situations? How do you take care of that? How do you try to minimize that? Then security becomes an issue. That if you have artificial intelligence systems, what if some enemy takes over the system and tries to compromise your safety and so on? That is really a big concern that is there. Then you have the issue of evil genies. So genie is the one which, when you rub the lamp, suddenly appears. That one. What if the artificial intelligence system, um, you know, suddenly puts up a monster, or acts like a monster, and tries to destroy humans as such? This is one concern which is expressed to this particular issue. Then the issue of singularity. How do we remain in control of a complex intelligent system as such? Because a complex intelligent system becomes as intelligent as us, and then to control it you might have to be more intelligent. You cannot increase your intelligence just like that. Then how do you manage that? That leads to a self-reference or a singularity. So this is where that is one issue. And then one ethical question is about the robot's rights. If you really are talking about consciousness in artificial intelligence, then you need to talk about rights of robots. Then how do you talk about them, and how do you define such rights of a human treatment of artificial intelligence systems? These are some ethical questions which I have just put up so that people from a legal point of view can understand what this sort of a issue of artificial intelligence can lead to. So the real voyage of discovery consists in seeking new lands, not in seeking new lands, but in seeing with new eyes. That's about the perspectives that are very important, is what he's trying to say. So coming to towards the end of my talk, I'm getting into the legal aspects. One is the issue of human rights as such. When there are machines and there are humans, in the same situation, that they interact. For example, I was talking in the beginning of you getting hit by a car driven autonomously, which is artificial intelligence system. Then what about your rights? What rights do you have? What rights do the artificial intelligence system have? These sort of things become very important. And so human rights in many situations where there are machines and artificial intelligence systems which are involved, then human rights have to be relooked and we have to think about them. Legally, there can be many issues that are there, because so far the legal framework has only taken humans interacting with humans and not talked about machines having a similar capacity. So if machines have similar capacity as humans and to act or think, then what happens is a question which we have to talk about. Then there is the issue of privacy in general and data privacy in particular. So because again this becomes a problem as such, because once it gets into the machines, many of machines are not independent entities. They are networked, they are connected to others, and so let us say you are using a robot in your house which is having capability to help you and do a lot of things, but it is driven by a software, and that software is downloaded or it is controlled or distributed by a particular outside agency. Now your data can be compromised. So what happens then? This becomes these are sort of questions which can come in as such. So data privacy becomes a major issue when you talk about artificial intelligence systems specifically, because such systems need a lot of information to be collected about you in order to help you. Let us say we are talking about helpful robots, then that is the question. Then there is the issue of contracts and liabilities, that humans have been having contracts where there is somebody liable for that, and then how do you enforce this? If the other party is an artificial intelligence system, then is it liable? It becomes a question. Okay. Then there is the law of torts, where you fix accountability. Accountability, there is law of torts. Somebody was pointing out just now in the comments. So again, this becomes a problem as such, because how do you enforce that? Now, of course, many people have come, many governments have come up with laws and rules for such systems, specifically for autonomous vehicles and so on. They are slowly putting it in. But, you have to think about in the future also, what is going to happen if artificial intelligence systems start doing most of the things that humans do today. Because of mistakes made by them, some loss happens to you, then is it accountable is a question. So this is also a situation which one has to think about. Then bias and discrimination I already spoke about, but here from the legal point of view also one has to deal with it. And finally, the intellectual property. Again, what is going to happen with many of the artificial intelligence system is, if you are able to create artificial intelligence system which is more intelligent than humans, what super intelligence, let us say, and it's able to come up with a lot of new patents or ideas and so on, who is the owner of them? How does it go about? Because the development, it might not be the one who created the super intelligence, Might not be that he is totally responsible for it. It might be because of the development in the technology from the human race, working on it from centuries together. So if that is the case, is it that the new idea belongs to everyone? How does it go? What part of it belongs to everybody, or how do you resolve these issues? Intellectual property, questions. These are also a very important issue. Yeah, the issue of ownership of an idea and so on. Because does the idea belong to the creator of the artificial intelligence system, or just to the artificial intelligence system itself, or the creator of it, or the owner of it? The owner can be different from the creator. Then becomes a question comes up. Okay, so these are issues which one can talk about. There are many such other legal aspects also which can come in. From my limited understanding, I have only put a few of these which I found in the literature. I would like to come to the conclusion because already it's 11 years. So the future of artificial intelligence is in our hands. Right now, it is true that it is in our hands. Whether this will always be true is up to us to determine. Um, so we have to see, because though there are philosophers who say that you will never be able to create consciousness and so on. What if it is possible? And nature has a way of imposing its own priorities and plans. We might think that we are the pinnacle of evolution, and nature, we are the best and so on. But nature might have its own plans, in the sense, it might be a natural thing for nature that human intelligence creates another intelligence, and that super intelligence goes forward and evolves and so on. So we don't know about that. In the end, for nature, everything is naturally natural. So with that, very controversial statement, I would like to conclude. And I am, these are a few references that I have put up. I'll share my presentation, no problem, so you can refer to them. And a quote by Winston Churchill, that the empires of the future will be empires of the mind. The only thing is, we have to think which mind. Is it the human mind or the artificial intelligence mind? That is what we have to think about. So with that, I'm open to questions. Thank you so much. Thank you.
The respected sir, thanks a lot for your insight on the techno-legal aspects based on artificial intelligence. Now the forum is open for the discussion. With your permission, shall I take the first question, sir?
Sure, please.
The first question has been posed by Mr. Saeed regarding artificial intelligence in automobile sector. So he is going to say that too much of artificial intelligence in the machine shop of automobile sector is a good sign, as he is bringing an anecdote that in Germany, auto industry had a catastrophic killing of human in the shop floor for few years ago. How are they ensuring the safety to the use? That's the first question, sir. And the second question is also having a question related to automobile sector. Are they follow the Six Sigma quality initiatives in the shop floor? So these are the two questions posed by Mr. Saeed Khater.
Okay, one is he's talking about what happened in Germany in the auto industry. Can you repeat that last part of that question about the catastrophic part? What is that?
Catastrophic killing of humans in the in the shop floor, sir.
Shop floor, yes, yeah. Okay, so it means that some artificial intelligence system has gone wrong or done mistakes, and resulted in loss of human life. So this is exactly the question that that one has to think about, as to see how responsibility can be fixed. Before creating such systems, one should actually think about that, and we should have a system of fixing accountability. And accountability has to be fixed in many ways, because there can be, as I already pointed out, there might be an owner of that shop floor or the factory, and there might be people who program that particular system. And so there is various levels of accountability, and one has to talk about that. So without resolving such things, you can't. So the law is developing in this area, and a lot of things are being put in place, but still there is a lot of work to be done. That is true. That is true. What was the second question again?
Is going to follow the Six Sigma quality initiatives in the shop
That
floor?
is artificial intelligence or shop floor,
Yes,
on
sir.
the shop floor, you mean?
Yes, sir. Yes, artificial
I
intelligence.
I think shop floors, in Germany or most of the countries, they do try to follow that. As I understand, that is why their quality is quite high. But then, when it comes to new systems that are being developed, there can be failures. That doesn't mean the quality is at a loss there. It just means that development has not been fully done, or the development has not happened as such. That is what I would say as such. Because manufacturing system can have very high quality. If the very idea of how it is built is wrong, the technology on which it is built is wrong, it can result in wrong outcomes. So the mistake can be at various levels. So we cannot say. I think Six Sigma is definitely used in the shop floors. I believe, yes, but it might not be that the technology also, in the development of technology also they have followed that. That is a different thing. Manufacturing they can follow. In research, I don't think they can apply that so easily as such. Okay. Research by itself is a error-driven process. You do make mistakes and then you discover. So if you say if you don't make mistakes, then where is the research? That is the question. Yeah.
So second question is from Ms. Rashmi Hedge. She's going to ask uh, how people used to say artificial intelligence will overtake other technology. Now people speak about quantum computing. Will it take over artificial intelligence? What is your general viewpoint on this aspect? Uh, will artificial intelligence or quantum computing is going to rule the world? How can the student keep themselves equipped with such exponential changes in the technology?
Okay. I think here this is the issue of means and mechanisms. The artificial intelligence systems need some computing system to drive them. Okay, they cannot work in a vacuum. Just like the human mind is embedded into the brain. It's the brain, which neurons and so on, where the human mind is there. Okay, that is where it's realized. Similarly, artificial intelligence has to reside on a particular platform. It has to be driven by a particular platform. There has to be hardware to do that. Whether it is silicon chips or some other futuristic type of thing, there has to be some system. So today it might be that we are using computing systems we have. Tomorrow there might be another computing system using quantum computing. And with quantum computing, artificial intelligence might become even more powerful. So artificial intelligence is the outcome of a program. The program can run on any platform. It can run on quantum computers. It can run on normal your today's electronic computers. That way, this is a different. The question is, I would say one would make the other one even more powerful. That way, that's what would happen. Probably with the type of quantum computers that are going to come out, artificial intelligence becomes super intelligence, and then it creates much more powerful computing, which is much more powerful than quantum computing. We don't know how the development will happen in the future. So that's a thing which one has to think about. Now, how can students keep in touch with such things? Actually, I would say students have a lot of imagination for such things, and they do read about such things. It's important that when they read about such exciting things, they also try to see how is it connected to current technology or current this thing, and try to make the connection as such. How to link the two. So the point is that many times that connection is lost. That is where I know some students who are very good dreamers, who have good imagination, very soon get lost because they are not kept in touch with how something is supposed to be done at that level when they are doing their studies. So then they end up being nowhere as such. I mean, a few of them might they still become successful dropout and create Microsoft or Google or something like that. But not everyone. It doesn't happen with everyone. Yeah. So next question, please.
Sir, Mr. Noel Deepak Shri is asking a question. Can artificial intelligence be a better decision maker compared to the humans in the top executive management of a company or in the topmost leadership of any country? When do you see this will happen in the near future?
Okay. Yeah, I see. If we are going to talk about systems being created which are super intelligence, if that is going to happen, I'm sure they will be better than human systems of today. That is there, but whether that will ever happen is something which we cannot easily say as such. I personally believe it will happen. This is a personal, thing, or viewpoint as such. Because if you look at technology and the way it is, one thing is being built over the other, there is no reason why we should not understand one day how the complete human mind works, and then we might be able to rig up systems which are much more powerful than that. That would be a natural evolution, I would say. And if that happens one day, and such people, systems are there at the top of running systems, companies and so on, definitely their decisions will be much better as such. Will they be perfect decisions? I don't think so, because decisions, no matter who takes it, any super intelligence also will depend on the information it has got at that point of time and the situation in which it is working in. So, if you there is no way complete information can be there of any situation because of the distance. So, if you deep down philosophically, it's impossible to build systems which take perfect decisions, keeping all information in mind of the entire universe. That is not possible. So, uh, I think we will be having better decision making systems, but they might not be perfect. That is what I would say. So, yeah. So
Sir, I would like to take the last question probably,
hmm.
since there are so many questions in the chat box. One of the question posed by Dr. Anjali Ganesh, whether
Hmm.
overuse of artificial intelligence will make the human beings more dependent and lethargic.
Yeah, of course. Obviously, this is one of the things which many people feel will happen, and it is probably true that it will happen because more and more you are relegating your activities to the machine, and so the machine will be doing things for you, things which currently you were required to do because they were a little bit of a indeterminate type of nature. For example, if you are having in your house a particular coffee making system, coffee this thing, and you kept things in different places, it won't be easy for you to use current systems which are there in the market to program it and make it do coffee. But if you tomorrow there's a robot which you can give instructions just like you give to humans, it might go and do coffee for you. Then when it's able to do all that for you, then what do you have to do in life? Nothing as such. Then I was just talking about systems which are going to replace everything that is around and do the wealth creation for us or development for us, thinking for us and so on. Then where do we go? This is one actually a little pessimistic way of looking at it. An optimistic viewpoint of philosophers here is that humans will find another level of doing working, that they will still find, because the universe has got so many potential, possibilities. There are galaxies to, visit, discover. There are so many other things to which you can, still invent and discover and so on. And if that is the case, then we are just, if you are thinking about what is there in this planet and around us and what we are able to see from here and thinking that is the end of the world, we are mistaken. So I think humans will find another way, a platform of more powerfully doing what they are able to do, provided they use the current intelligence which they have in a proper way. Whether this will ultimately result in an intelligence which will overtake them and be a super intelligence and ultimately result in that, if that happens, then we are only going to be a footnote in the development of evolution or development of nature. That at one phase there was what is called as human phase, where humans were there. After that, there was the machine intelligences, and they went ahead and so on. So they will write the evolutionary history and say there was amoeba, and then there was more evolved animals, and then there was human, and then the machine intelligence came and so on, as if it's a natural thing. It will be natural, in fact. So the thing is, there are two viewpoints in this. There are this sort of viewpoint which says that we are very irrelevant, and there is also the other viewpoint which is more spiritual in a way, saying that humans have got a spirit which is beyond all this, and that spirit will, ultimately, dominate and help us to, chart our way in the progress of the nature, or in the progress of evolution and so on. So we don't know which of this is right. It is something which one has to reflect upon. Yeah. Thank you. Any more
Sir, thank
questions?
there are a few more questions, sir, in fact, but due to the shortage of time, since we would like to get into the practice mode, we probably are going to end this particular session, sir.
Thank you.
First
Thank you
of
so
all,
much. Thank you.
we are grateful to you, sir, for coming over here and giving your scholarly insight on the topic of artificial intelligence on technological aspects. In fact, it has been uploaded by the participants also. Let me read that particular message. Beautiful presentation. Thanks. Also thanks for the organizing committee for the fantastic topic to enrich the intellectual process. Respected sir, on behalf of the entire organizing committee, we would like to thank you for the insight on the topic, sir. Thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay. It was nice
This,
interacting, and thank you so much. Okay.
thank you. There is a small announcement to the participants. The same link will be used for the next session also. There is a bio break of 15 minutes. So we'll be assembling, in fact, we are going to virtual assembly back on the same link at the same platform, 11:30 a.m. Thank you.